got to tell you, I am so excited to have you with us, Dory. I'm just going to show you what a groupie I am. If you were in person, I would definitely get your autograph.
All right. Well, next time we're in person, I will give you the autograph. It may have to be on something else, and you can just like stick it in there.
Dory.
Unless you want to carry that around with you everywhere you go.
Yes. Well, I got to tell you, so this has been one of my favorite, well-worn, dog-eared, highlighted.
Now out of print.
Now I'm out of print because you have a new one. So I'm super
We
excited
do.
to introduce everybody to you, Dory Chattel. She is famous in the field of dialysis and particularly in the field of kidney disease and dialysis member or patient education. And quite honestly, I frequently refer to your material when I'm working with patients, and I still do.
Yay.
But you've got so many amazing tools to really help support people. And as you know, kidney disease, dialysis has been my passion for a long time. We just say a few decades is all. We
Mine too.
don't need to share, so we have to get a heavier face or neck cream. But as you know, our passion here at Specialty Care Management is reducing the risk of dialysis, not just in terms of cost containment strategies, but truly in uh, in getting upstream from dialysis. And I
Is the
know.
most important thing. I would
Mhm.
much, much, much rather help someone avoid or slow progression of chronic kidney disease than teach them about dialysis any day of the week.
Yeah, or have them slam into dialysis. That's a really
Oh,
scary
that's the
place to
worst.
be.
Yeah,
Really
that's
scary.
the worst part.
So, gosh, I'm just gonna, now that I've introduced you a little bit, I just wanted to kind of give you the floor and just have you share a little bit about. I know you and I could talk for a long time. We're like two peas in a pod, but just share a little bit about what brought you to this space, what you're most excited about.
Okay. So I actually came to this space in 1989 when I was 11 years old, or maybe slightly older than that. And I went to work for a woman named Edith Oberly, and she was the home hemo partner for her husband, Terry, whose kidneys failed when he was in medical school. And he was an identical twin. His identical twin also had kidney failure. They actually wrote a book about it and called something like Twin Cyborgs. They both had, oh, darn it, I knew I was going to forget the name of the disease. Anyway, it's a disease that affects the ears and the kidneys, Alport's.
Oh,
Yes,
Alport's.
they had Alport syndrome.
Kidneys and ears do go together,
Kidneys
right?
and ears,
Yeah.
exactly. In utero, they both
Yeah.
develop at the same time. So they both ended up on dialysis. But he's in the middle of medical school. They had one young son, and his kidneys failed. And life at that point was, how can I keep going? How can I finish medical school? How can I live with this and still have the life I want? And this is really critical. He was the first dialysis patient I ever met. The first fistula I ever saw, I thought it looked like a snake under his skin. It was a very big, very well developed fistula because by the time I met him, he had had it for a very long time. And his wife, Edith, wrote a book called Understanding Your New Life with Dialysis because they ended up doing home dialysis. Lila Jorgensen trained them. I think she might even still be working. I'm not sure. Lila was great. I was lucky enough to have the opportunity to meet her many times.
Mhm.
And but Edith was an English teacher and figured out it's like, there's nothing out here for us in the way of education. There just isn't anything. So she wrote this book, and we ended up revising the book, updating the book, keeping the book in print, pulling parts of it out to turn it into other things. And eventually the book was no longer in print. But that idea of a chronic disease where people could live well if they got a good treatment, but yet most Americans whose kidneys failed did not live well, and that's still true.
Yep.
That really hooked me in because I've been interested in chronic disease since I was like 10 years old. So I was hooked, and I have worked in renal ever since.
Wow. That's so inspirational. It's interesting because I have always had a passion for my whole life's purpose is to empower myself and others to live our best lives. And as a
Mine too.
nurse, I just think it's a holy calling almost.
Absolutely.
And educating, I've seen through proper, and you and I'll go down that rabbit trail, not just education,
And
right?
just education. Yep.
Right. But really empowering members involves a whole lot more than just education, right? So
Right.
maybe you can talk a little bit about that, because I think empowering is such a pregnant space in terms of really helping people to thrive on dialysis or avoid dialysis. But
Right.
what does that look like for you?
Or thrive with any chronic disease, really. But
Correct. Yep.
you know what it looks like is, I feel like the piece of empowering patients with any chronic disease that we tend to miss in a clinical setting is the emotional piece. So social workers are sort of trained for that, but people don't see social workers until they hit the dialysis clinic for the most part.
Yeah, so they sit with a nurse who says, okay, what's your next question? Answer the next question, like a waitress in a restaurant, filling in
Yep.
everything that the nurse needs to gather.
Yeah.
Or the
Yeah.
physician behind the keyboard, same thing.
Right. Well, I every once in a while, I mostly the talks that I do, and I've done lots and lots of talks over the years. Mostly I get nurses, I get social workers, I get technicians, I get patients, and every once in a while I get to talk to nephrologists. And every time I do, I ask them this question. Say, how often does it happen that you see a patient in clinic and they're getting close to needing dialysis, they need an access, and you start explaining, well, there's hemo and there's PD and there's fistulas and there's PD catheters, and the eyes glaze over or they well up with tears and they don't hear a word you say, and they come back for your next appointment and you have to do the exact same thing all over, and all the heads nod like bobbleheads. And I'm like, this is what's happening. They're terrified. They can't hear a word you say.
My life is over.
Yes, that's what they hear. They hear, oh my God, my Aunt Ethel was on dialysis and I saw her go through it and it was terrible. And, my mom had diabetes and my uncle and my grandfather. I'm doomed. I may as well just give up right now. There's a lot of fatalism out there. And there's a lot of lack of knowledge. But the problem is you can't put the knowledge in while the fear's in the way. It won't go.
Right.
When cortisol and adrenaline are surging, we can fight, we can flee, we can freeze, but we can't learn. So we're trying to educate people at the worst possible moment when they're at maximum fear.
Right.
And they can't learn that.
If you think about it, so fear is also a powerful motivator. The
Absolutely.
problem around fear is that there's this invisible line, and without rapport and empathy, which we've talked about, and that trust, then it's easy to either scare somebody into a corner, right, where they freeze up.
Yep.
But the skilled clinician and the empathetic clinician or support person is able to deploy fear as a motivator. And you talk about this too, the twin powers of fear and hope, right?
They are flip sides of a coin.
Right. And just enough to get them to get off the fence. You sit on a fence, it only gives you a sore bum, by the way, right?
Right.
Just enough to get them to move. But if you don't couple that with, maybe you can talk about that, the twin powers.
I was a psychology major as an undergrad. And I took psychology of motivation, among other things. I took every psychology course I could get my hands on because psychology is great.
Juicy. Yeah.
And one of the things that I never forgot from my social psychology class is that a useful strategy is to scare people somewhat and then give them a solution versus terrifying them so that they can't function. I never forgot that. It's been useful, because you don't want to underplay it. If somebody has chronic kidney disease, that is a big deal. You don't want to say,
we're doing a lot of that today, right? I mean, the milieu out there is, hey, there's no problem. You got a little touch of sugar. When it gets to be too much of a problem, I got a pill for you, or I got insulin for you. When that's too bad, don't worry about it. I got a nice cush dialysis chair for you here.
Uh-huh,
And we don't
exactly.
serve people by not sharing enough bad. We don't you gloss over things. You can't dress up a mud cake and present it as a cake and expect people to eat it and go yum yum.
Exactly.
Right.
So we want to make it clear that this is an important, serious health challenge, but not only is there a lot they can do, they're the only one who can do a lot of the things that need to be done.
Yeah.
Nobody else is going to put food in their mouths. Nobody else is going
The
to give them
doctor's
the
not going to come
pills and
take
make
me
them
for a walk.
right.
Come
I
on.
don't think so.
Doggone
Are
it.
they going to follow you to the restaurant and see what you order? I
And
don't
prick
think
my
so.
finger and check. Yeah. Give me the
Uh-huh.
finger on my forehead when I'm good. Yeah.
Right. I mean, what we don't tell people, because we have a healthcare system that is set up, it's very top down, and it's very much,
Still
well,
very
we must listen
paternalistic.
to the godlike clinicians.
Yeah.
And I love clinicians, and I know hundreds of them, and they are wonderful, especially nephrologists. I
Yes.
adore nephrologists. They are terrific.
Yeah.
But we're taught from childhood that, this compliance model that doesn't fit chronic disease. It was never meant for chronic disease. It doesn't fit. And expecting people to comply means that somebody's got to be going around watching everything they do and saying, no, 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 not that, not that. No, no, don't eat
And
that. Don't eat that.
how empowering is that?
Not
You know,
at all.
because kidney disease has a lot of this in it, right?
Oh, it does. People get
Absolutely. And it
yelled at the
totally puts
clinic.
people in a corner. You bad little boy, you bet you're here because you didn't mind. Oh,
Yep.
yeah.
Yep.
My pet
Exactly.
peeve.
Mine too. And
Yeah,
the word compliance should never, ever be used with respect to a chronic illness.
correct.
Because in a chronic disease, your job is to self manage. And that means we need to empower you to be able to do your job, to know why you might want to do your job,
Mhm.
and to be so happy with yourself that you're doing your job that you are intrinsically motivated to keep doing it.
Yeah.
And that's what we forget. We're just like, yelling at people to do whatever. It isn't going to change anybody's behavior. It's going to make them not talk to you, not confide in you.
I think
It's
that's why
showing lack of empathy.
I think that's why I'm such a fan of the coaching model. You
Me
know, when
too.
we talk about nurse coaching, a coaching model implies that you're not broken. And it also implies that you're the expert. Now
Right.
I have a bag over here with a bunch of knowledge and strategies that I'm going to share with you, but ultimately you're the boss, you're in the driver's seat. My job is to come along beside you and give you what you need so that you can have the life you want. And you
Exactly.
know
And be
how
your
to get it.
cheerleader along the way, because chances are you're going to mess up at some point.
Yep.
And rather than having somebody yell at you, you need somebody to say, you know what? I'm looking at this, and 90% of the time you did an amazing job. Keep up the great work. If
Yep.
you can get to 92%, that would be even better. But,
And it's
keep
okay.
trying. Yep.
Dust yourself off, hop back on, and tomorrow you can try to walk across the pool.
Exactly.
I can't walk on
Hopefully,
water
where
yet.
it isn't, oh, I was saying, hopefully, where it isn't above your head.
Right. Well, it's interesting because a lot of times, what I have found is people, as soon as it usually takes, and I've seen people make huge shifts. I've seen people double their kidney function in as little as 2 or 3 months. And the important thing that has to happen is they have to have an experience with hope, right? With the combination of a knowledge and a skill set, and they have to have that light bulb moment that, oh my gosh, this works. Don't you love
Yes.
it when they say that? I can't
Yes.
believe this works. And you say, well, I can. Or my doctor doesn't know what I'm doing, but he said to keep doing it. We say, well,
Yep. I see that a lot.
you know what you're doing. You're doing all the work, and but sometimes, to your point, Halloween comes around, or a birthday, or a Christmas,
Thanksgiving. Yep.
and if you're not careful, you fall off the wagon, and then you might as well give it up because you've done, like, to your point, you've done all this stuff right, but now, and if you're right, if you don't have somebody there who can reflect that back to you, all of us see our shortcomings, right? All of us, we're never good enough for ourselves. So yeah.
Well, and lifestyle changes are really challenging. And there's so many things that go against them, from the cost of things like, fresh vegetables and fruits, to not knowing how to cook them, and
Right.
having
Yep.
family who don't like them, or going to a family event where there's nothing but Cheetos and Doritos and,
And you
onion
don't
dip.
want to disappoint grandma. She made that cake just for you.
Exactly. Yes. Yes. Oh my God. My next door neighbor. So I've had pre-diabetes for 19 years. My last A1C was 5. Okay. I'm in like if you checked any of my blood numbers, you would never know. But if I stopped eating the way I ate, they
Yeah.
would shoot right back up. So my next door neighbor is an absolutely fabulous baker. He's just wonderful. And he will just literally drop by with a whole tray full of cinnamon buns or a cheesecake or whatever. And you know what? My strategy is I take one bite so that I can rave about it credibly. Oh my God, it was so good. It was so creamy. It was just, oh,
That
George,
was so
this is,
thoughtful.
yes, you're so sweet. He's the sweetest guy. So I can't not eat it, but I sure as heck cannot eat a whole cheesecake or even a
Right.
whole cinnamon roll.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
there are ways. You can try grandma's cake a little bit.
just a little bit. Well, it's interesting, Adora, I love using your tools. We use a lot of your tools in our member education. Got some fantastic resources. I'm frequently telling folks, hey, when you're sitting in the chair, go on to dialysis or kidney, or sorry,
Kidney school.
thank you, kidneyschool.org, and
Yep.
listen to the audio book. Work
Yeah.
through a module. I mean, I think that sometimes, and there's a pregnant space, if you will, for education, and there's a space, particularly where people are going through like dialysis disequilibrium or the dialysis fog, or they're in that space where thinking is really hard because it's muddy up here. Um, but the thing I love about your tools is that they can work at their own pace. It gives you something to refer them to, or family members, right?
Right.
Having
Right.
having the support of a family member who says, how do I don't know how to help, and to be able to give them a tool, a resource, if you will. And I just love that. Your material is written in a way that's easy to understand. It's not dumbed down, but it's
Right.
not so difficult that I say, well, I don't understand a word this says, right? And it's not difficult to understand. And then that audiobook, I think, is delicious for people.
Yeah, the last couple of kidney school modules we haven't done audio, and I don't know that we will, but now there's technology that can help with that. So there are readers that can read the modules even without us actually producing audio, which is a nice change. But the thing that I like best about kidney school is that people can choose what they want to learn when they want to learn it. And one of my pet peeves is and this is there's actually a lot of this going on in nephrology. February is phosphorus month. Everybody's going to learn about phosphorus. Now, if you're facing homelessness, or your partner's about to leave because you have no
Yeah.
sex drive or whatever, phosphorus is the last thing on your mind. And one of the key principles of adult learning is relevance. Phosphorus
Yeah.
is not relevant to you right now. Other things are much more so, but people are short staffed and busy, and it's just easier to give everybody the same information the same month, whether or not that makes any objective sense. And I would argue that it does not, and that it's probably better than nothing, but maybe not a lot
Not
better.
if it ends up in the trash, right? If
Right.
it ends up in the
Right.
trash and you don't read it, then why bother?
Yeah.
I
Well, but it
really,
got ticked off of a list, so
yeah, the waitress model. Well, we're not waitresses
yes.
here. And I really think that that kind of education support has to be tailored. And like
Right.
you and I were talking before, I think that tailoring even goes so far as to be relationship dependent, right? If I'm
Yeah.
talking with a truck driver and I'm trying to explain what the GFR is, what's the
Mhm.
glomerulus, what does the GFR represent? I might talk about that as it's kind of like the fuel filter in your truck. If I'm
Exactly.
talking to a homemaker, I might say, well, it's kind of like the Brita, the water filter on your kitchen sink, right? Or
That is a perfect example of using relevance. Those are great examples. Because you are going to talk to an engineer or maybe a NASA rocket scientist, and I know lots of them, differently than you
Differently.
might talk to somebody who, drives a bus
Right,
or, runs a childcare center.
right.
They have
Absolutely.
different frames of reference.
And to not tailor that education, I think in some and I don't mean to be inflammatory, but in some ways it's kind of disrespectful that we expect people to fit into a cookie cutter mold. It's
Right.
our job to tailor, not their
Yes.
job to fit into our mold. It's our job. If we really do want to have a positive impact that's going to be reflected at the end in
Hmm.
terms of better outcomes and ROI, if we want to have that at the end, that's on us, right?
Right. But it's a challenging thing. I think teaching empathy is challenging. I think that teaching
Yeah. Mhm.
a coaching model is challenging.
Yeah.
We're asking people to, not just do a rote thing, but to change what they do to meet people's needs. And that's
But
always,
keep up, baby, because you've got 350 members to manage. Let's go.
that's right. So we don't ask for much,
Yeah,
but
yeah, I got it.
yeah. But if we could at least start even just very simply when we're talking to people who are newly diagnosed to just say, I know this is probably really scary for you. Most of the people who I talk to are really scared, and that is totally normal, and it's okay. And here's the thing, there's a lot that you can do to make your health better. And that's why I'm here. I'm here to help you. Just that acknowledgement. You don't have to be a psychologist to at least make somebody feel heard.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yep.
And
Absolutely.
that's simple. And I just did it and it took what, 15 seconds? It's not,
And
but
I
that
already
means
had the on
everything,
response.
right? Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. But we don't do that in healthcare. And it doesn't really matter what the scary diagnosis is, and there's plenty of them out there. We don't ever say, I know this is really scary. I
It's
know
not
this
the
is really
norm for
hard to
sure.
hear. I know this
Yeah.
isn't the news you were hoping to get. There's any number of ways of putting this that just make it clear that you're a human and they're a human. And we're going to interact on a human basis for a minute or two before I start flinging facts at you.
Yeah. And maybe pausing.
Right.
Pausing in between our, having them drink from the fire hydrant.
Yeah. Yeah.
What do you understand so far of what we talked about? Or I know we
Yep.
talked about a lot of things, but what's the most
Or
important
what's
takeaway?
your biggest concern right this minute?
Right. If there
What's
was
what?
one thing.
Yep.
Hmm.
And the reality is people are pretty likely to cry, and that's okay. It's hard for a lot of people to deal with, especially doctors. But people who, Lori Hartwell likes to say, and I've always thought she was right, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Yeah, true, true. You can do a whole lot of things with somebody when they know that you care, right? You can
Absolutely.
educate, you can push,
Yes.
challenge. You can't, it's hard to do that without that foundation of empathy and trust that you talked about early on.
It
Really
is
critical.
pretty darn near impossible without having that.
So can you do that in an app? Please say.
I don't know that we can exactly deal out empathy
Can't
in an
push a
app,
button for that, can you?
but what we do is when we develop educational materials for patients, we write everything at a fifth or sixth grade reading level, paragraph by paragraph, not just checking the whole thing. Each paragraph has to hit that level. And we do that on purpose because even if you are a NASA rocket scientist, if you're scared, you are not comprehending at your usual level, and you can know everything about rockets and nothing about kidneys.
Yep.
I mean, most of us do not learn about kidneys in school. We don't necessarily know anything. I mean,
Even nurses, even
right.
nurses
They don't
and
learn
doctors.
dialysis in nursing school. I know.
How many
So,
times have you talked to a provider, right? And they say, "Oh, I'm a nurse. I should know all that stuff." And then you just gently throw
uh-huh.
some things out there, and then you got them because they're like, "Oh, I didn't know that." right?
Right. Right.
Or it's different. It's just different when it's you, right?
It is different. So, what I used to do a lot when I flew Delta, because I was platinum on Delta and I would get upgraded a lot. I would sit next to various different business people. Now I fly Southwest, which I like much better. But when I flew Delta and I got upgraded all the time, nobody got away from me without knowing, what I did and that there was such a thing as home dialysis. Because, you always end up having at least that little bit of a conversation of, oh, what do you do? Well, I run this nonprofit organization and we educate people about kidney disease. Every single person I have ever talked to knows somebody with kidney disease because it is that prevalent in our culture. So I would go through, okay, your uncle had it, your neighbor has it, whatever. So, there are 7 different ways to do dialysis, even though we tend to think in terms of PD and hemo being binary. There are 2 ways to do PD. There are 5 ways to do hemo. So there are 7 ways to do dialysis. And I would explain that, nocturnal home hemo is the most dialysis that somebody can get, and that tends to correlate with having more of a sex drive, sleeping better at night, having more energy,
Carrying a
living
baby
longer. Exactly.
Yep.
Exactly. All of the things. Not one of them ever got away from that conversation without saying, well, seems like a no-brainer. I would pick nocturnal home hemo. I'm like, sure you would. Because there's no emotion, because this is an academic exercise for you, because you're not thinking of it as, oh my God, I have to make a choice and all of the choices look bad and scary.
Yep. Or how many times have you had a conversation with somebody who's nearing dialysis and they say, I'll never do dialysis, I'll die first? How
My
many times?
mother says that.
Yeah.
My mother has told me that multiple times.
100% of people.
And I believe her, actually.
Oh, okay. Well, I was going to say,
I absolutely believe her.
100% of the people I've talked to have said, no way, I'll die first. And they all end up on dialysis. So
I do know a few that there was one woman on Facebook who had uremic frost. When was the last time you heard of uremic frost? I do not think she did dialysis. I think she stuck to her guns, but most people don't know anything about it except it's dialysis and I don't want it.
Yeah.
It's badly named, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Some people rename it life-alysis, which I think is a nice thing to do.
Oh, I like that.
I've seen a few people do that.
Oh, I have not heard that before. That's delicious to me.
Isn't it?
Yeah. It's interesting because then and you work with some of these members and then their story shifts and they say things like, well, now I get to see my grandkids graduate. I didn't think I'd be able to do that. Or,
right.
Gosh, I feel better than I have in years and I didn't know it could be like this. Or
yep, slippery slope.
Yeah. Or I'm sure you know Sam Trevino, right?
Yeah, Sam's great.
I love him. He'll tell you, I got married, I got to finish college, played soccer throughout. The dialysis saved his brother's life. His whole story about getting through the hurricane. He's just one of the most inspirational.
He is a force of nature.
Yeah,
it's terrific.
Dialysis is not the end of the world. However, it's fantastic to avoid it where you can, right?
Absolutely. And those things do not contradict each other at all. They don't.
At all. Well, Dory, if people have questions, if they want to know more about, your work, your new book, which is awesome.
That's the old book.
The old book.
That's the old book. Yeah. The new book will come out next year. We are buffing up the references. We're making sure that they all say what they're supposed to and that we've highlighted everything that we claim that they say and that they're all in folders and it goes in layout, it gets pictures, all kinds of cool stuff happens. We go to the Library of Congress and get copyright and it'll come out next year. But the decision aid, the new updated decision aid is based on the references in the new book. So the new book is a little different than the old book. For one thing, it includes transplant and conservative management, which we call comfort care, and the decision aid does also. And then for another thing, we're splitting the book in 2 because the old part of the book, which is like all about dialysis and transplant and conservative management, That's about as long as the whole old book was. And then we also have a whole values section where we've expanded all the resources around each of the values. We can't print that too. I mean, nobody's going to read a 400-page book. So that's going to become online content. And we probably are going to do some booklets out of the book. So we may do a PD booklet and a transplant booklet and a conservative management booklet. And so we will be rolling this out in all sorts of different forms. But the new decision aid is mykidneylifeplan.org. And it looks different. It has a different name because now it isn't just my dialysis choice.
Okay, that's the one I'm familiar with.
Exactly. That's the old one. And starting, I think, tomorrow, the old one is going to automatically take you to the new one because
Ooh.
it is live. And actually, we have a comment form, an orange button on every single page where folks can go through it and give us comments, and we can tweak it and make sure that it's as good as it can be before it's final. Oh, yes. There you
Isn't that
go.
beautiful?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
love this because, sometimes you go in and they say, well, like to your point, here are all the choices, but you're like, I have no idea. Hemo
Right.
just sounds easiest. I don't know if I can
And I don't want any of them, right? They're all
right.
bad. All the choices are bad. And what this lets people do, first of all, it gives people hope. It starts off with hope. So if you read this, kidney disease can affect every part of your life. Use this free tool to see how dialysis, transplant, or comfort care may impact your life. Your treatment is your choice. We can help you choose the right treatment for you. So we're starting in a different place. And then choosing 3 values to start with. People can go back, they can choose every single value if they want, but each one's going to take 5 minutes. And, if you want to be there all day, by all means, choose every value, but most people don't, So it helps people think about the options in terms that make sense to them because, you get to say, okay, well, what's most important to me is I want to spend as much time as I can with my family, or I need to keep my job. I don't keep my job, I lose my house, I can't send my kids to college, whatever. Or I want to travel. And it's going to tell you for each of those different options. And actually, you can shut off transplant or comfort care or all dialysis and just focus on whichever block of treatments you're interested in. So that's new as well. But it's this is a way to sort of try a treatment on for size,
Mhm.
get your motivation in place. And I think, although we can't prove it yet, but I believe that what will happen is that when people know what their motivation is, they're going to be way more likely to stick with a home treatment if that's what they choose. Because a big issue now is not just trying to get people home, it's trying to help them succeed at home because a lot of people end up back in center. Oh, you didn't tell me this was going to be so much work. I didn't realize how much space all this stuff was going to take. I
Yep.
thought this would be easy. I was told it would be less time than I am in center, and it's more time. And if what's front and center is I want to be there for my kids,
It is my
I
wife.
want to be able to take the machine with me, then that helps you get over those road bumps.
Right. Yeah. And so you have realistic expectations. And isn't that the
Exactly.
source of disappointment? You know, Disappointment
Absolutely.
comes when we had a set of expectations that weren't met for whatever reason. And the more,
Well, and people try so hard to sell people on these therapies that they don't necessarily bother to tell them about the time
right,
it will take, the space it will take, and I think most importantly, how long it's going to take to feel comfortable at home. And we find that that varies anywhere from occasionally as little as 2 or 3 weeks. There are folks who just take to it like ducks to water and they do great from the get-go. They are unusual. They are not typical. Typically, it's at least 6 to 12 weeks at home to get in a routine, to feel things getting easier.
mhm.
And sometimes it can be up to a year.
I like Sam's story. He talked about how, he just watched him messing with the machine. And before he knew it, he's like, well, hey, that's my machine. So show me, teach me. And,
Yes.
I think encouraging people to be open, um, just to be open. They don't, it's, you don't have to make your decision overnight. And that's part of the reason why earlier education is really important. The earlier that we can let people know, it's kind of like I tell people, it's like shopping for a car. If I wait to start shopping for a car till my car is dead in the driveway, I'm gonna,
You're going to make a fear-based decision is what's going
correct.
to happen. And
Yeah.
that's what happens to
And have no control over what I'm
80
driving.
plus, I think, percent of patients in the US is they make a fear-based decision. And fear-based decisions tend to be bad choices
Yeah.
that you make under duress.
Yeah.
So at the start of stage 4, the other potential benefit for educating about modalities then is that the emotions are not fully engaged. It's still not so close that
Right.
you're like,
Overwhelmed.
so you can be like the fellas on the plane and have a little bit of emotional distance and say, well, that really makes sense. What's important to me is this and this, and look how well that fit.
Yes.
Versus, oh my God, it's here now, and I need to make a choice, and I don't like any of the choices, and I'm just not going to make one, and then this will go away, right?
And then I end up in the
Yeah.
emergency room with a catheter on my neck.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Well,
we've solved all of the things now.
there you go. Well, I just gotta say, Dory, I'm a huge fan. If you haven't figured out now, I totally love and appreciate your work. Thank you for the wonderful work you do.
We are
It's brilliant.
so on the same page, and I'm so glad for the work that you are doing, and I wish that
Oh,
everybody had access to it.
well, we're here.
That's how healthcare should work and doesn't often enough. So it's just so gratifying to know that you are in the trenches making this work better for at least the folks, whose lives you touch.
Well, there are a lot of good people in the space who
Yeah.
want to do the right thing and who really want to help. When you talk about, access to care, a lot of that goes into, well, you have to have, not only you have to have the kind of care, but you have to be able to afford it, right? You
Yep.
have to be able to even know it's there. So, we appreciate being able to access your resources and share them with our members. Highly encourage people, if you haven't met Dory, to certainly reach out to her. She's on LinkedIn. She's brilliant. Check out her website. What's the best website for them? Is it the MEI.org?
Probably mei.org because it connects to all of the others, but actually all of our sites connect together. So if you find your way to any of them, so we have lifeoptions.org, which is our non-dialysis CKD site, largely biggest non-dialysis CKD site in the world that we're aware of. We have Kidney School, which has been around for, oh my gosh, I think since 2001. I think Kidney School is 21 years old and it can drink now.
One of my personal favorites.
We have Home Dialysis Central. So that's our site to raise awareness and use of PD and home hemo, because those are the treatment options that empower people the most to self-manage if they get to the point where they need dialysis. And then we have the Decision Aid, My Kidney Life Plan, which is for folks to make a choice. Those are our 4 patient-facing sites. And then we have the MEI.org. We have a CE website for nurses. We have KDQOL Complete, which scores the KDQL 36 quality of life tool. And then somewhere in there, I think it's still live, we have a technician professionalism site.
Ooh, dang. Okay, so I didn't know that one.
We do
That's
the core
awesome.
curriculum for the dialysis technician. That is us also.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So I know.
Well, and printed material, brochures, workbook. I love how you've got
Yep.
2 booklets that are my favorite, are the early kidney disease and your late stage kidney disease.
Yep.
Just easy to follow, makes sense.
Yeah, so there's a treatment options one that is going to become part of that series, and then I'm thinking also a PD one and a transplant one, and that go into more detail, because I'm not sure there really is a PD booklet that's out there that doesn't just say here's how you wash your hands.
And now that PD is being reimbursed at a higher rate, we are definitely seeing an uptick in PD.
It's a great first option.
So
It buys so much time. It can keep people in their jobs, and it doesn't involve needles. It doesn't use up any blood vessels. There's so many advantages to starting with PD if you're one of the 2/3 of people who can.
Yeah. And I think most clinicians would choose PD first, right?
Mhm.
So yeah, it's interesting. So anyway, and especially in the face of this a new we have this new emphasis on value-based care, and being able to promote more upstream solutions really makes my heart happy. I know it makes your heart happy because that's what
It
you're all
does.
about too. So yeah, certainly reach out to Dory Chattel. And Dory, thank you so much for sharing some time with us today. I really appreciate it.
You are so welcome. I am so honored to be asked, and I would come back anytime. Just
Hot
ask me.
dog, lunch date it is.
All right. Sounds like a plan. Have a great rest of your day.